Hey Sergio,
Hi.
my name is Morris, and this is episode 3 of Harajuku Data Lake. So last week we talked a little bit about jobs and work, and we actually got really good feedback on that episode. Of course, I think the reason we might have gotten really good feedback is because everybody that listened was somebody that knows us well. So we'll see what things look like when the episode goes out into the real world. We also have a official website online now at hjdl.space, and we'll be adding our podcast to the iTunes store shortly. So that's very exciting. So this week we're going to be talking about Docker. And Docker is a technology that my previous company was very excited about, my current company is very excited about, pretty much the entire IT world is very excited about. So I wanted to start with sort of the basics of what it is and go into why it's so important. So, Sergio,
Hi.
how would you describe Docker?
Well, first of all, I will say that my previous companies, they were also very excited about this. In my previous company, for example, I used to manage and I create a Docker deployment. And I remember one of the even previous companies, they used Docker for making a huge deploy of applications online. So the truth is that I think we have both of us a little bit of experience, no, with this.
Well, a tiny bit of experience. I mean, my most direct experience before I came to my current company was that was running WordPress for a little more than a year with Docker. And actually, I'll use that as sort of a jumping in for what Docker is. So, what I was doing there is so WordPress is this blogging application that it's been around forever. It powers something like a third of the internet, but it's also widely known to have fairly frequent security vulnerabilities.
Hmm.
So it's a piece of software. It's written in PHP, and it absolutely requires running on MySQL. It
Yeah,
can't be run on other databases.
yeah.
And so I was a little bit, I wanted to start a blog, and I wanted to start off with WordPress as sort of the easiest option, but I was also a little bit scared about actually installing WordPress on on the VM that I was running my server on. So what I ended up doing was I had one Docker container running WordPress. I had one Docker container running the MySQL server, and then I put Nginx as a reverse proxy in front of um, the WordPress container. But I actually I didn't bother putting Nginx in a container because I trusted it a lot, and I was kind of tired of setting up Docker containers at that point. So,
Are we running right now our web page with Docker?
no, we're not. The Harajuku Data Lake webpage is actually it's a static site built with Hugo, and it's just uploaded to Amazon S3. So if we actually do get incredibly popular, I'm going to have to rethink our hosting options because that might be kind of expensive. Uh, but going back to my blog, what ended up happening was, I was running. I had these two Docker containers running with set up with Docker Compose on this little Linux virtual machine on Sakura Internet, and what would happen is every few weeks, every few days, every few weeks, the WordPress process running in Docker would stop,
Oh.
and so the WordPress container would stop, and then the site would go down.
Hmm.
Um, and so I would log back in and I would
No.
manually restart the Docker process. And it was kind of embarrassing because I think the uptime for that website over the previous year was something like, I don't know, like 75%. It was not like five nines at all. And I think and the reason that the containers were not getting automatically restarted was because given the specific version of CentOS that I had and the specific version of Docker that I was running, there wasn't a really good, simple way to have containers restarted automatically.
Yeah, I can tell you that at least right now and in previous versions, maybe after 0.7, you have a flag in Docker Compose that you can say always restart or restart dot always. So you can do this that happen to you automatically.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I remember that flag, and I remember that flag was not working. And I
Mm,
remember that it had something to do with something and something. But I think it also speaks to the state of how far Docker has come in the past few years. I
sure.
think, just a year ago or just 2 years ago, Docker was a much less mature project, and it's really advanced really, really quickly. So, Sergio, let's go back to like what is Docker?
Okay. I think that at the end, Docker is a container tool. So this let's say product platform. Well, it was let's say let's start right. This was a platform, okay, a open source project, and the name of this project is Docker with the lowercase. But then a company they register Docker with the uppercase. So right now this is a company that is called Docker that is using the open source project that is Docker. So that's a amazing marketing thing. Yeah. They did very well. That's why it's so popular, Docker. But it's because they are using an open source project, and this open source project at the end, if I remember correctly, this is a branch of another project that is LXC that they were using in Google. So yeah, this Docker is just a container. Okay, it's a container. That means that you can create same image, okay, with some files, and you can reproduce them very easily. Yeah, in the technical side, simple is that's the idea. In the marketing side, as I said, well, that's amazing what they prepare, and later, in yeah.
Okay, so we touched briefly on containerization there, and I think going back to what I was doing with the blog is that I had this virtual machine that's running on a host, and the virtual machine is being run by a hypervisor. So at Sakura Internet, they have some system, and it might be KVM or some other hypervisor system that lets a bunch of different customers run their own virtual machines, and each of those virtual machines will have their own kernel. And then within that one virtual machine that was, my virtual machine that I'm paying like $6 a month for, I can run multiple containers that all use the same kernel. And there's so Docker is running, is making it easier to run containers within that virtual machine. And
Yes.
those containers share the same kernel as the virtual machine.
Exactly. After one version of kernel, they introduced the ability of namespace, that what is happening is he's copying in the memory the same kernel that you are using. And this is isolated to the others. That's why it's faster than the virtualization, because you don't need to have another layer, but you are reusing the same memory. Okay, but then you need a specific kernel, and this is not happening. Well, they are simulating, but this is not happening in Mac or Windows, and that's why in a kernel, a Unix kernel, this is possible, and that's why the projects start only with Linux, Unix environment systems. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Docker is really dependent on Linux containers. So when you're running Docker on Mac or Docker on Windows, you're running a virtual machine, or you're running your own hypervisor, which on Mac might be like VirtualBox, and then within VirtualBox, you're running Docker containers. So
That's right.
And I think there is some complexity there, which is something that a lot of people run into when they first set up Docker, because it's like, okay, I've got this Mac, I want to run containers on it, but then there's this kind of extra layer of VirtualBox, and there's a little bit of setup that has to be done there.
Yeah. I think that the problem is, well, not the problem, but one of the weak points is that you need the kind of daemon to be running in your machine, no? So when you are starting deploying several machines, not only in your machine, you need to start first in that machine running Docker, and then this Docker is going to run the containers that you are using. So that's a point, no? That in the virtualization you also have, or even worse.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about what Docker is. So what can you do with Docker?
Well, for example, in my previous company, we use a lot Docker for having like a kind of README about the commands that you needed to start all the process. For the deployment, Docker was a very initial version, so there were not as many options as right now, and we use Bash for deploying. So we were using, we created with a Bash what is, well, yeah, with Bash all the Docker daemons in the different machines, and then we just have a small script that was checking with Docker Compose. So this problem that you had, we were checking the machine was up or down. We were using a spot instance, so it was a bit like, okay, when something is gonna shut down, please start new machines and then turn off the process, the container that you are running right now. But the main goal that we were using is for having in a one place all the documentation, all the steps that we needed for know what was happening. So you could read that and say, okay, I know what is happening in the company. I know how you run the test, how you build these steps. Everything is there. You don't need me. I am not imprescindible in the company. That's one of the main goals. Yeah.
So it sort of replaces that README file. So instead of having the README file that tells you that, to run the system, you need this database and you need this application and you need this cache and you need this other thing, you have it. Everything is there within the Docker.
Yeah, because using Docker Compose, you can have the different service, so the relationships. Okay, the link that is created from the different machines. You can have the ports, you can have the volumes. Right now there is a network. In that moment it wasn't. And then, well, you can say, okay, I only want to start this side of the backend, in these microservices. You have all the logs. Everybody in the company was able to reproduce the same environment. It's not about, it's not working. No, it's working everywhere with the same steps. You can, for example, frozen all the versioning. So you are using a version of this app, so you know that everybody is going to use exactly the same version. There is not going to happen that, okay, I'm running something and it doesn't work in my computer and I go to other place and it works. This doesn't happen. You only have to Docker Compose. But I have to say that because the company was a small size, we didn't deploy massively. We didn't use, for example, Swarm. Swarm is a tool that is when you have just machines and you just want to deploy in all of them in a very random way containers. And this means that if one machine goes down, this guy's Swarm client server, he's going to care about moving all the containers from one place to another one. And because everything is serverless, stateless, you can do this kind of procedure. You can kill one machine, start in another place. That's fine. That's why Docker is nice. It's also important to say that Docker, he was master image. So you have all the steps that is being seen as a file. They are just files. And this one is idempotent. So it means that you, as I said, you kill one machine and you start from a new one. And this is going to happen in the same way. He's going to override, and this should be fine in your machine. Of course, it depends on you. Okay, you have to apply, you have to create all the logic to be able to start idempotent, but it allows you.
Okay, so I think you touched on a few different things there about what makes Docker really important, and so it's sort of this infrastructure as code concept. So for a developer, you have this one file that defines everything, the entire infrastructure. And because it's just in one file and it's completely reproducible and it's checked into your version control, you can run an instance of the entire infrastructure of your web app or whatever you're running. You can run a copy locally on the PC you're using for development. That's exactly like what is going to be run in production.
Yeah, well, this is a bit more complex because we are talking about Docker when you run just Docker build. So it means that you are building all the stages. But if we use a repo that is called, if I remember correctly, Notary, in Notary you have what is a registry, and in this registry what you have is all the image. So in the moment that you do Docker pull, you don't have to rebuild the image again. That's done. You only have to load that file because it's a binary file, and you have to load in Docker. So it means that when you start a Docker container, this takes seconds. So that's very interesting. If we compare to other tools, that's the difference. No, the big difference is that you only have to load the file, that's over. You build in another place. You can use continuous integration to test that image, this container. You can load, for example, external tools in the moment that you create for testing. Well, you can do everything you want, no? And in all the time, well, you have that as a process, so you know that every step is the same all the time. And if you want, you have other tools, as I mentioned right now. You can use Docker Compose for all the kind of building and to know the relationship. You can use Notary, that is the registrar, for having all the image. So once you build the image, you upload the image with a tag and a version. And third, you can use Swarm. This is a tool for deploying into a production level environment that everything is going to be automatically set.
So, I mean, it really affects every part of the development and deployment and production infrastructure process, and that's kind of why it's so big.
Yeah. But let's say, and let's be clear that one, this is very nice for the developers. So this is very developer friendly. And second, I forgot.
Okay, so it's very developer.
Oh, yes, I remember now. I remember that, as we said before, the use cases, some of my friends, they used to have their own projects. So, for example, you have in Git and in GitHub, you have the projects with the Docker building. So they, for example, for security tools, you only have to do git pull, you download that, okay, you use, and in the moment that you are not in that project, you can shut down that container, you can start another one, and if both of them, they are using the same port, you don't have conflicts between them. And that's amazing for me. If you have your own computer, but you are in several projects because you are a freelance, you have your personal projects and your company projects, you can have that environment. No? Like, okay, right now I'm in the company, I start all the containers, and my computer is clean. I don't have to, and I don't know if maybe MySQL is writing in another place that maybe can be overwritten by another application. No? So I think it's very interesting. And later we can talk a little bit about the security, but from my point of view, and right now with the last versions, they really care about this side. But let's talk later.
Well, I mean, since we're on that, and since you do have a background in security, when I was running my WordPress instance, I sort of thought of it as a way of adding security so that, if something terrible happened with WordPress or with MySQL, it wouldn't actually mess up the main Linux image. But at the same time, there have been some questions about whether Docker is really providing the level of compartmentalization and security that people are hoping that it provides. So, some people have been saying that actually it's not as secure as people think it is, et cetera, et cetera. What's your take on that?
Yeah, well, I think that it's not going to be worse than before. So if you use your own machine to run something and you use this the same but inside a container, I think this is not going to be worse. Well, the people, they could say, well, if you give privilege to access to the socket and you can scale from there, from that container to other containers, of course this is going to be worse. But you can perfectly you can set that the user that is being used for in the container, he's going to be a normal user without root permissions. You can set that the container itself, he's going to be without privilege to modify the kernel calls. Okay, so you can really isolate that. And if you maintain the last version and you keep updated with the only with the normal fixes, there is not going to be a problem. And as we said before, if you use tools like Swarm or other ones, okay, there are more, you can just, okay, I have a new version of Docker, so I deploy a new machine, you change what is the daemon of Docker, you upgrade to the last version, and you can move everything you had before to new machines, or just to change dynamically. You can shut down a couple of them and you start a two new versions, and you can progressively, without changing any machine, you can update everything to the last one. And if you do something like that, that can be done perfectly automatically. Okay, there are projects like Mesosphere that they work like this. Well, that's better than before. Right now, it's a commodity. It's something that that's out of the box. You don't really need a person who is there and he's modifying this, that. Well, I think it's evolution from my point of view.
Mm.
And talking about security, I think the community, what I have listened from the Spanish people, is that they don't really like so much. They don't really trust, and one of the complaints is that it's not enterprise level. They say that they care a lot about the developer in experience, but they haven't thought about the real challenges. They prefer something like Chef, that it's able to modify, for example, the networking or other things. They agree. They agree that you need some kind of tool. No, there are other more tools in the market that they let you to deployment. But from my point of view, and right now that we have what is the versions, and every version has a hash, and this hash is it's a fingerprint of your image. I think that it's pretty safe to say, okay, once that they release something, I know very well what I'm releasing. And if you have all the process, like the continuous integration, that you are getting the code, you are preparing an artifact, this artifact you check with the test, you do kind of unit test, integration test, you are sure, because of course if you are not sure that your continuous integration is not safe, of course they can inject you whatever. But if you know that, you can push the image into the register and then pull that. I think it's completely safe. I think that there is fear, no? There is fear. The people, they don't really believe in this kind of new technologies. Everything is like, wow, that could change everything. Well, the truth is that everything is changing. Right now, from this project appear, the kernel of Linux, the new versions, they have been modified to be more friendly. Mac has been developing the new file system for making it faster, more performance. They are doing, in every version, they are doing improvements in this side. So I think that the world of the computers is changing itself, moving in the direction that these big, huge companies, because these companies has a lot of money, they got huge investments. They are tending, no? So these guys, they are talking and say, hey, please, can you modify this? Or, well, they are the same guys that they are really making a patch to the kernel to be more friendly. But yeah, everything is changing. And the security, they, for example, they, maybe 1 year ago, they hired a couple guys that they came from amazing companies. I don't remember the names, but they came from amazing companies, and they have been the headers of the security. And you can trust in that guys. They really explain everything, how they were improving, what are the problems, because it's very important, no, to know what is your weakness to then make the fix. And yeah, they create amazing systems to address all these problems. If later you, as a DevOps, you don't really care, you do this like, okay, just set the default permissions, well, maybe then you have a problem. Or, for example, in our case, in our company, everything is static. So it means that you use Docker for deploying something for an app, no? So it's the same like Heroku. At the end, I don't really know, but probably Heroku is using something like Docker, no? Something like container process. But if you do something dynamically, for example, that you let to the people to use containers directly, so you can SSH to the container, well, you have more superfice to be vulnerable, no? So there are more vector attacks. That's the problem.
I think that was basically about the difference between immutable architecture and where like once the server is deployed, no one ever has the ability to log into it, and more traditional architecture where a server is a long-lived sort of thing and multiple people have access to the server via SSH.
Yeah.
And I think you also touched on, like, you know, the only constant is change in our world and in the IT industry, and that's sort of where some of the fear around Docker comes from, because it is a big change and it really does affect so many different parts of a developer's workflow.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go back to, I think one of the things that you have a lot to add on is the entire deployment process of a modern application. So, you know, where it starts with a developer working on a PC or something, the code is in GitHub, there's a code gets checked in, there are pull requests. There's like their tests get run automatically. There's continuous integration. There's like staging. There's production. Code gets rolled out. How does that entire process, like, what's the ideal for how that entire process should work in the modern world?
There is no silver bullet. I mean, I cannot tell you what is the process because there is not really a process. Okay, at the end, what is a requirement. So you have to understand the requirements of your company, and then from these requirements, you have to create the process depending of that. So I cannot tell you, oh, first you have to do this. No, maybe you need 3 stages of test. Maybe you want to have a stress test, or maybe you don't have because the business level is like, oh, we need to release it right now, so don't invest time in the site. So I cannot tell you what's the unique process. The guys of GitLab that we talk about them, I think these guys, they know very well the process they define in an image, that it was from the idea to the feedback, when you already finish a product and you want to improve that project. So I cannot really define that. I can tell you what we have, what I have previously. I have seen several patterns. You can research about big companies, and we can talk one day about big companies, how they have the design. But at the end, I think what is important is to know these kind of tools or stages. So you can use Docker, you can use, as we're going to talk another day, serverless, or you can use directly one machine. You can use Ruby and Rails. You can use Python with the Django. You can use PHP. You can use whatever you are more comfortable, and you are faster to deploy something. Right now, as I said before, we tend to go to what is a commodity. I mean, if right now I have something that is going to be done for me, well, at least for me, okay, my opinion, but I think that you should try to use it. Even if you have to pay a price, they are going to care about everything, and you don't have to reinvent the well. So I think that this is a concept that is very important. And Docker, in this case, he gives you a lot of kind of customization. So with Docker, you can make everything as you want, completely unique. And Docker is going to let you a lot. Well, it's going to give you a lot of opportunities when you are doing this continuous integration, when you want to use tests, when you want. But maybe depending on the company, you don't really need nothing like that. So yeah, let's say that these are tools. You have to choose the right tools for the right work, and yeah.
Okay, so no recommendations at all there for how the deployment process should work.
Not really. I mean, we can talk about what we have in our company, but I don't really have any recommendation. The recommendation is, of course, like, okay, just test everything in your local machine. But as you said, the same one, test everything, making a staging environment, you have a production environment, but not really. And Docker, it can help you. It can help you. For example, I remember in my previous company, I had the Jenkins. We use continuous integration with Jenkins, and I had with Docker. So I had 3 Docker instances up, so they were running all the same time. Well, the truth is that there were a master instance, and this master instance was calling to another where they were the slaves, and these slaves, they were containers. So you run something in the container, so it's isolated, and you have the result, and you continue the process. But for example, in another company, I remember we created artifacts, and these artifacts, they had a tag, and this artifact is because the company was had more how can I say, more projects, and in one single project was the composition of several projects. So if you create an artifact, it means that it's you get together several of them to create another project. But for example, right now we are using only, each project is independently to the others. We deploy each one differently. We don't create one kind of version that you release. For example, if you have a client and you have enterprise, or let's say, for example, RubyMine, right? RubyMine is an ID for developers. So these guys, they are not releasing every day. They are testing
Mm.
all the time. Okay, so that's the difference between continuous integration and continuous delivery. But right now we are using continuous integration. That means that we are testing and we have one version that we know that it's working. But continuous delivery means that every time you are deploying all the versions, they are deployed.
Mm.
Okay, so right now we can say, okay, this version we don't want to deploy. And that's why we have a last step that is a manual step. I have to go there and I have to click, okay, please deploy. With continuous delivery, it means that if the process, they inject something, there is a kind of backdoor, whatever, and they want to do something, they're gonna do. It's the same. You can be affected in both things. But at the end, as I said, this is just a tool. You have to choose wisely. Depends your requirements. That's the most important, the business requirements. And yeah, that's it. Docker is going to help you. Docker is going to
Mm.
help you to make it more automatic. Docker is going to help you, for example, if you want to use tools like Circle CI. I think that they are preparing something, or they have something with Docker, so you can just send the container and send the instructions, and they're gonna test that. So I think it is something for go a commodity way. That's it. Yeah.
Mm. Okay, well, I do want to return to like different architectures for deployment and continuous integration and continuous delivery in
Mm-hmm.
another episode. But
Yeah. Sure.
it's sort of it's all. I think it's closely related to Docker because Docker helps a lot. It makes it a lot easier. Anyway, so I think that we've talked a lot about Docker. Is there anything else that you wanted to say about Docker?
Yeah, yeah. Well, there is something right now you said about the deployment, everything. We are talking about Docker, and maybe we are relating to the deployment, but there is one company. It's called HashiCorp that
Mm-hmm.
they prepared everything like a bit like GitLab probably. I don't really know. I don't know the details, but I can tell you that HashiCorp, if you want to really know about DevOps, you need to know their products. Okay, what they
Mm.
have, they release all of them in open source version, and then they have the premium version. No, they even host that for you, all of the stuff. But they have
Mm.
different tools that each one has a purpose, and well, that's completely amazing. What they prepare is completely amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually just on their website right now, and one of their top level pages is called DevOps Defined,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and I think that's probably something we should talk about in a future show.
Yeah, if you are on the page, you can see the different stages, no? Monitor, deploy,
Deploy,
secure,
secure,
provision,
provision,
package,
package,
test, build.
test, build,
That's not in order, but
defined, delivered.
yeah, yeah. But I think that you can use Docker with that, guys. But they are gonna give you all the environment for you. It's amazing.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks for. I think we're done with Docker.
Sure, let's go.
All right.
Next one.
Talk to you next week, Sergio.
Oh, that's it. That's it. I thought we were going to talk something else.
No, I think I want to let's record serverless next week.
Okay.
I need to like do more research about serverless before we can record an episode about serverless.
No, but I was talking about Docker, for example, about Rocket, how, for example,
Oh,
I don't know.
okay, okay.
I think, yeah, maybe that's all. But I was thinking about, or for example, the evolution of Docker, how it has been in the last years, no? Because at the end, as a lot of kind of products, they start very like they were gonna eat the market, no? And they
Mm-hmm.
start with one version. Everybody was more innovate. We start because I also start using Docker in a very early moment. And after the
Mm-hmm.
time, they really changed a lot of things, no? A lot of breaking change. I remember that in some versions, 0.4, 0.5, this one not even working, but even working. I remember that I was deploying, I had a very old version because, well, it just, it was the networking. Sometimes the packets, they were dropped. Maybe the problem was similar to what you had in the blog, but
Mm.
well, that was terrible, no? And right now, I have used again, and well, in Mac, the experience was not so good because they had some problems, but you have tools. So it means that the
Mm.
community is huge. For example, I have here some numbers. We are seeing that the project of Docker, okay, has like 40,000 of stars, and the
Wow.
project of Rocket, of that is the Coreos, is another kind of containers that they say it's more compostable, secure, built on standards. Okay, it has like 6,000. Okay, so the numbers is like 5 times, no, more than 5 times. So 6, 7. So I think that is very interesting, no? How early company they start with something. It's like everybody is like wow, 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 this is gonna be huge, no? But in all the way that they are improving the product, well, they had so many people like me that we got deceived, no? By the like, oh man, this is not working, and I had to spend so many hours. And as I said, I want a commodity. I want something that is gonna improve me a lot. For example, I want a repo where I have all my projects. I can build them. I can change them. I can use another project that someone did. For example, previously, all the time, when you wanted to do a MySQL instance, well, you had to go, you had to download the package, you had to install, you have to configure. Right now is Docker pull MySQL, and you select the version, and that's all. That's what is interesting. But in the moment that you have this feature, but later it doesn't work, imagine that you are a huge company that so many clients, you cannot rely in this kind of technology, you know. So I think that, well, it happened, no, to several companies that they are still running. I think that serverless is another example, but InfluxDB, for example, another one that they had the same problems. But right now, you look at the product and it's like, wow, that's amazing, that's amazing. But yeah, they are all the time doing improvements, and but I love, no, this kind of evolution. I think that it's important to start with the project to see what happened, to understand the history, but maybe you have to wait a bit longer, no, or you have to define very well what is the purpose of this project. It's the same that they said before, like, oh, this is just a tool. Do you know the tool? Oh, you know? Okay, do this in this environment. If you want to do something else, be careful. Maybe there is another tool that is better. No? For example, we haven't talked so much about what is the other deployment tools, no? But Vagrant, Ansible, Chef,
Right.
these tools at the end, I think that they are they are very useful. They are amazing, and I understand that they are better in some case than Docker. That's completely fair, no? But you need to know them, and maybe if you start with Docker, it's just okay. That's better, but. Yeah, it's the same that I told before about security. You have to be very careful where you use, how you use. Docker is not gonna provide more security. Well, the truth is that the defaults, they are pretty good, okay? So you are not gonna be exposed with the defaults, but you can have bugs, you can have problems. It's gonna be your app, it's your code, it depends, it's just a tool. So do you know how to use? We saw in the first episode how the tools, they were the same that we use right now, but these guys of GitLab, they had the kind of problems because, well, they they didn't double check, something like that. So yeah, let's say that I don't want to criminalize Docker because he's early technology. I think it's a very interesting
Criticize, I think, is the word you might be going for.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, so Docker definitely has advanced a lot in the past few years. So you would definitely say that Docker is ready for production environments today.
Oh, what a question. I think so, but I think that if you are sure that that's the context that you have. You have the limitations, no? So if you are sure, use it. If you know that it's gonna be faster because you have this kind of cache, or you want just for example to development, or I think it's ready for production. Okay, my point of view is that it's ready, but when it's ready, what it means is like, okay, but let's say like this. Maybe production is one machine, or maybe this is 1,000 machines. So it's different, no? It's production. What means production?
Right.
What is the production? Maybe you want to say enterprise level. That is what we have been talking about. Is it ready for enterprise? Well, I think that it can be, but if I am in a huge company, I'm not gonna try to change everything to Docker tomorrow. I'm gonna try to change one project, or the new project that I'm gonna develop, I'm gonna use Docker. I'm gonna see if the employees they really like it. For example, I think it's very useful, Docker, when you start in a company and you just have to execute one command and everything is up. And well, I think that's amazing that in the first day that you join the company, that's done, everything. But the problem is that, as we were saying before, Docker is not only the only tool that you have to run and that's it. No, you have to install Docker. You have to assign permissions. You need the privilege. You need, for example, to mount the volumes. You need to create, if you want, with external networking. You have to do so many things. You know? That's why other tools, maybe they are more appropriate for example, to install operative system. No, maybe it's not Docker what you want, but Docker, and we know, is part of the future. And the next time we're going to talk about serverless, but each one is going to have his own market. We cannot say, oh, this is better, this is worse. No, it's like, okay, what's your goal? What's your target? This, okay, maybe Docker is a solution. Oh, that one, maybe with serverless is enough. That's the thing. As I said before, Docker can be very highly customized.
Yeah, and of course it depends on the company. I mean, if you're running a bank, maybe Docker's not production ready, but if you're running a startup, maybe Docker is. I think it does really depend on your requirements and what you're building.
Yeah. If you have everything in COBOL, maybe you cannot even support the last kernel. Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's it. Just use your head, no? Think about twice.
So what about Docker competitors like Rocket? Tools that do very, very, or LXC, or tools that do very, very similar things, but in slightly different ways.
Yeah, well, I don't know so much, but I can tell you as before that HashiCorp, I have listened that some big companies they were using. It's amazing. I think that other tools, for example, they can even deploy what is Docker. So we can use other tools for finish using Docker. No, at the end it doesn't. They can be complementary. You don't have to avoid one to other. For example, from these guys, HashiCorp, I was using Consul just for starting and shut down machines. So I was using only one part. No, so at the end, I think that the interesting is to try to understand them. We were using in this company in the previous. We were using Chef. So I know how to use the cookbooks, but you have to decide, no, if you really want to maintain the Ruby code or you prefer. So it's just a decision. It's the same as I said with serverless Docker. It's the same that I can say with these tools. Each one is going to have their market. Each one has a purpose, and maybe sometimes and that's the problem. If you decide to use one tool for everything and not everything fits, or you use a tool that is the wrong thing because another employee or the chef leader or the CTO, he wants to use this tool, no? So, and it depends. For example, Chef, he uses Ruby, and maybe you are very skilled with Ruby, so well, that's cool. Or you want to use something like Docker because it's like Bash, you know, so you have this easier for you. So yeah, I think it depends. It's nice to know the tools and to say, okay, I can use that. For example, Mesosphere is amazing for deploy Docker. It's amazing. It's a tool that is amazing. But maybe you want to use, because you have everything with AWS, you want to use ECS, that is a service that they have, like the Swarm. It's using Swarm. The truth is that it's using Swarm. So it depends, no? You must decide what you need. Or for example, another tool that I have, I researched in the past, that is the Pachyderm, that they are using Docker for analytics and doing this kind of big data, no? So
Pachyderm.
Yes, Pachyderm. So at the end, they are just tools that you need to know for decide when you have a new project, no? And say, okay, this one fits.
You mentioned Mesosphere. What is Mesosphere?
Well, I can say that I have experience with that, but the experience was so well, it was one machine, two machines. This Mesosphere is the same as Swarm. You just have to say, okay, I have this task, I have this container, this image, and then, you just run that in the number of machines that you want. You can do one task. You run one task forever. You can say, okay, I want in these regions. Right now with Amazon, okay, you can do a lot of things like that. You can combine several services for doing that. You can use for example, a Spot, the Fleet Spot, that it can deploy in several regions. You can do the similar in AWS, but Mesosphere is a tool that has been already app for quite time. And these guys, well, if you really want to do what could be like MapReduce, big data, to deploy with that is amazing. But I don't have more than the experience that in that moment, because when you start with using these tools, you really know that you are gonna be huge. Because for running all this stuff, you need a lot of how it is called, workers, to be sure that it's up. No, so at least if you don't have 5 machines, don't start doing that. It's like a waste of time. You need 3 machines to be sure that this is not down. And so this is, I think that maybe it depends your problem, but depends your requirements, but maybe this is too complex, but it's just another tool for deployment.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, building scalable services is something where there's still a lot of different tools with a lot. There's, I mean, in terms of things that do things like Docker Swarm, it seems like there are a lot of different options, and there's no one clear tool that everybody should. I mean, there's this Apache Mesos, there's Docker Swarm.
Yeah,
it seems like a part of the market that still things are still shaking out.
Exactly. It's the same that happens with the hosting platforms, no? At the end, with Mesosphere, you can create a kind of Heroku if you want, no? I think that it's not defined, but it's defined. Well, what happened, and talking about business, what happened is that new technologies arise. They appear, and then some guys, they saw that they were going to be huge things, and they start investing. And they are the first guys that they create all this environment. Before, I remember, I forgot the names, but I researched all the UIs for Docker. I researched all the kind of Mesosphere platforms. And in that moment, with the version 0.1, 0.2 of Docker, well, there were like 3-4 guys, but these guys, they wanted to be there for in the moment that it was stable, just to have the name. So that's the goal, no? So right now everything is very like, oh, you don't know, but right now AWS is the king in talking about deployments and hosting and features, no, and services. Okay, maybe Google Cloud is there. We have other platforms, for example, even Heroku is being used Amazon. So we depend right now a lot. Amazon goes down and, well, that's terrible.
The entire internet goes down.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, but it's normal, and I think that is the kind of topic that we talk about, the commodities. It's right now you cannot start from zero. The other day I was checking some projects that they were just linking different applications and with Google, with the Google Translation, Google Emotions, VR, all this stuff. So in some hours you had some kind of app, some kind of project done. So, well, that's amazing, and Docker is gonna make it easier. You're gonna be able to just deploy something that before it took months.
Yeah.
So we are in the right direction, okay? But we have to suffer. We have to suffer quite a bit to arrive there.
Yeah. Setting up Docker will get easier.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. I think that's a wrap.
Yeah, sure. Now it's done.
Now it's done. All right. Well, we'll talk to you next week, and I think we're going to be talking about serverless next. So like and subscribe.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.